Hey friends, welcome back to the cabin, and today we are going to simply and safely can carrots, and this is suitable if you're new to pressure canning. So I really wanted to focus this video on those that are new to pressure canning and give you something that is simple and safe to kind of get you started. Carrots are a wonderful vegetable to start with because it's not intimidating, the processing time is not very long, and you're going to can a healthy vegetable to put on your pantry shelf that you can be proud of. So let's go over a few of the things that you'll need to start with. Of course, you need a pressure canner, and if you're not familiar with those, I'm going to link to a video here where I talk about the difference in water bath canning and pressure canning, and I would suggest that you go and watch that first to kind of get your feet wet and get you started so that you understand what the differences in those are. But of course, you're going to need a pressure canner. I've got the All-American 921. That's a workhorse and I love it. But there are some other great canners out there. You have a Miro pressure canner, and another very common one is a Presto pressure canner, and those are wonderful canners. But you want to read the manual and become familiar with your canner before you start. And also you want to be sure to use actual canning jars because those are designed to withstand the higher temperatures and the pressure in the canner. And also some things that you want is a good funnel. You'll also want something to debubble with, and we're going to have canning salt. Now you can use canning salt, kosher salt, or pink Himalayan salt with no additives in it. You don't want to use your common table salt because it does have additives that prevent it from caking, and it can turn your liquid cloudy. So in an emergency you can use the table salt, but it's not preferred. And also I'm going to have a small bowl of vinegar and an old dish rag that I use just for wiping the rims off of my jars, and we're going to check those rims to make sure there's no nicks, cracks, or imperfections in them. Now what you want to do first of all is to wash and rinse well your canning jars, and also let's talk about the lids. I know that lids are very hard to find right now at the time of this taping of this video. I do use the Harvest Guard reusable lids quite often, but today, because we are focusing on new pressure canners, I'm going to use the standard disposable flat lids and rings. And you also want to make sure that those are washed and set aside and ready to put on our jars. Today I'm starting with 4 pounds of carrots. We're going to see how far 4 pounds will take us, so that'll help you gauge how much you need when you go to the store. I've washed my carrots, I've peeled my carrots, and I've washed them again, and I've cut them up in chunks because I wanted something versatile to use in stews and soups and whatever other recipes like that I had. Plus it was quick, so we want this to be simple and as easy to do for your first time to pressure can. So I'm going to show you how I prepare my canner. Now a word about that, there is a difference between a canner and a cooker. A pressure canner and a pressure cooker are not the same thing. The pressure cookers are normally much smaller, and they're just made to speed up the process of cooking your meals, a roast or something such as that. They are not suitable for canning because normally the pressure is not brought up high enough to make it safe, and also they're too small normally. So we're talking about a pressure canner. Now what I'm doing today with mine is I have put in, and my manual calls for this, 3 quarts of water, and I will turn it on and start heating the water up. We are going to raw pack our carrots today, and that means that we are not going to cook them at all. We're going to put raw carrots into our jars and our jars will be warm. I will actually do mine in the oven rather than putting them in water. I'm going to have my oven heated and have my jars in there, and that's so that there is no thermo changes between hot and cold that will crack your jars. I will have my canner heating up, my jars will be hot, I will have hot water on the back of the stove to pour over my carrots after I put them in my jars. So I just pulled this jar out of the oven. It's very, very warm. So what we do next is, this is optional. If you're on a salt restricted diet, you certainly don't have to do this. This has nothing to do with the preservation of the carrots, but for a pint, I add a half a teaspoon of salt. Now I'm going to just loosely fill my jars. We're going to keep this simple. We're not going to stress over it or fret over it. Now we want to make sure that we keep 1 inch of headspace, and 1 inch of headspace is going to be just below, right here, just below the neck of the jar. We don't want our carrots to be above 1 inch of headspace as well. So we've got our carrots in the jar, we've got our half a teaspoon of salt. Now we're going to put our hot water, and that is very hot, so I'm going to go ahead and turn it off. And we're going to bring it up to 1 inch, a generous 1 inch of headspace. But now you see why your jars have to be hot. Okay, so that's just below that ring on the bottom of this jar. And what we're going to do now is, it's very, very important that you do this, that you work this around and get the air bubbles out. I'm going to dip my trusty little dish rag in vinegar, and I'm going to go around and make sure there's no salt particles or any kind of residue on here, and I'm also checking for imperfections. And now that we've cleaned our rim off well, we're going to reach over here and get one of our lids that was sitting in the warm water. And also, I forgot to show you this, my little magnet wand. That just makes things so much simpler when you're putting these flats on these jars. So you want to put this ring on just until you meet resistance. We're not going to crank down on this. And the reason that we don't want to crank down is the canner is actually a vacuum tight process, and it's pushing air out of the jar. Well, if you crank down on this with the rubber gasket on there, the air has nowhere to go. The lid will buckle, and that's where the air found a way to escape. It made a way to escape. Well, that jar will not seal because it's got a bent lid on it. So we just got resistance. Now what we're going to do, 3 fingers and just a slight amount of twist on there. You don't want to crank it down. Okay, so now we're going to put this one over in our warm canner. Okay, so let's just walk through the process again. This is jar number 6, I believe. So we've got our warm jar, we've got our funnel, a half a teaspoon of salt. We are going to loosely pack our carrots in here to with 1 inch of headspace. And this is probably going to be the last jar because I really won't have enough to do another full jar. Now I've got my warm water here. We're going to go to within 1 inch of headspace. So I'm just a tad below our ring on there. Let me do a little debubbling. And the reason that we debubble is because we don't want any air pockets in there, because where there's air pockets, that may not reach the full 240 degrees. And we have to raise this to 240 degrees for the specified amount of time to make sure we kill all the pathogens. One last time, we're going to wipe this rim off and check for cracks, chips, or imperfections. Okay, so we've put our warm lid on there. I like it warm because I like the gasket compound to be warmed. We're going to put that on just till we meet resistance. This is still very warm. 3 fingers, just snug it up. We're not going to put it on super tight. We're not going to crank it down. Okay, so that gives us, let's see, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 jars. Now what I'm going to do now is I'm going to reposition the camera again and bring you over here where you can see what I'm going to do with my canner to get us prepared. So I'll be back with you in just a bit. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is show you how I get my canner ready to start the canning process. And I want you to get familiar with your canner, read the manual. I keep stressing that, but if you're new to pressure canning, it's going to give you a huge amount of confidence if you're a little bit familiar with it first. Plus, it's safer that way. And I do encourage you to not be afraid of pressure canners, especially today's models. If you follow the directions, it's nearly impossible for there to be a problem. As long as you follow those safety guidelines, you're going to be fine. Okay, so we have this vent right here. We want to make sure that this vent is open. That's because we're going to move the steam out of there before we put our weight on. And also, that is where we regulate the pressure in the canner. So you see, that is a safety feature, a safety point that is very important. I'll have a weight on this, and I also have the dial gauge. And you want to make sure that this is in good working order. You can have your local extension office test it before canning season or before you can if you have any concerns about that. Okay, now all American canners, they require a layer of some type of oil around this edge. They do not have a rubber gasket. That's something unique about the All-American canner. So I will make sure before I place it on there that I will oil this with coconut oil. You can use coconut oil, you can use olive oil, you can use shortening, lard, anything like that. Now we don't have shortening in my house, but if you know me and you know my channel, I love lard, and we even render our own lard from our hogs, but that's a video somewhere else. I might even put it up here for you, okay? So now that I've oiled the edge of my lid, we're going to place the lid on the canner. And what we're going to do is, and your canner, no matter the brand, will also have ways to line up the marks on there that you can line your lid up so that it's in the proper position. So if you see here, there is an indentation here in the canner. I have an arrow here, so we're going to place it on here now. And what we're doing is we want these locks to go under these tabs here. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually, let's make sure that we have this all the way around. There we go, so it's down on their level. Now what we're doing is I'm looking for this lid to be as level as possible. Now if you have the Presto canner, you're not going to have to worry about that because it's going to lock down in one position, and it does have the rubber gasket rather than the oil around the edge there, okay? So, but what I'm going to want to do is make sure that my lid is level as possible all the way around. Now you can see here it's a little lower on this side and a little higher on this side. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put my toggles on opposite sides at the same time, just like my husband talks about putting a tire on, okay? So you want to do it opposite so you're not pulling down more on one side than the other. And I'll also adjust the lid while I do that. Let's go here. That would be the opposite. So I'm going to bring this side down just a little bit. Now we're not snugging them up. We're just touching them and leveling everything out. I'll go back and snug it up in just a second. Now it's still low on this side, so I'm going to make sure those are a little bit looser. Okay, so we're going to pull it down more on this side, on my right side, and allow it to come up. Oh, that's perfect. That's what I'm looking for there. Okay. Now I do need to put a little more pressure right here on this side to bring that back section up just a tad. Okay, so that's pretty level right there. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go around and just give them all a good snug. And it's hot. These handles are hot because they've been laying up against the side of the hot canner. Okay, so they're on there good and snug. Now what we're going to do is we're going to let this come on up to a higher temperature, let this water in here begin to boil, which I can hear it is boiling now, and we're going to be looking for a very forceful steam to come out. Now there is some steam coming out, but that's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a very visible, forceful steam. When we reach that point, then we're going to time it for 10 minutes. So I'll be back with you in just a bit when we have that forceful steam coming out. Okay, now as you can see here, we have a very forceful steam. So what I'm going to do is set my timer for 10 minutes, and then after the 10 minutes, then we'll place our weight on there and start building the pressure in there. But let me explain to you, first of all, why we are doing this. So what we want to do is we're forcing air out of the canner and filling it with steam. So that's why we want to wait till we get to a forceful steam, time it for 10 minutes, then we're assured that we have forced as much air out of the canner as possible. And so when the 10 minutes is up, then we'll place our weight on, and I'll go through those steps in just a bit. So I'll be back with you in just a second, and then I'll show you the next steps. Okay, so it's been 10 minutes. So I'm about to put my weight on for my elevation, which is 1,000 feet above sea level or below. That's a mouthful, but actually I would be canning at 10 pounds. Anything over the 1,000 feet, you will want to refer to your canner's manual or a good canning book such as the Ball Blue Book or the Ball Home Preserving Book, and I'll leave a link to both of those below if you're interested. But you want to refer to those. They're very trusted as far as your altitude, and it's very important that you know your altitude as well, so you know the proper weight to can at. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and slide this on. Now I'm going to do it from the side because it just seems to be not quite as hot to do it from the side. Make sure I'm on 10 pounds. Okay, so now what we're doing, we're allowing the canner to begin to build pressure, and mine will build pressure to about 11 pounds, somewhere between 10.5 and 11 pounds before we start getting the rock of the weight. Now it's already at about 3 pounds, so it's not going to take it very long to climb to that point. What we're doing is we're raising that temperature to the 240 degrees to the specified tested time. That's why it's so important that you have a trusted source for this. There's a lot of Rebel canning out there, and I do some of my own, but it's wrapped in the knowledge that I have acquired over the years of canning, and I know what's safe and what's not safe. But you got to be careful with some of the Rebel canning recipes out there because they're not safe. So you want a trusted source, and that's what you want to follow. Okay, so we're going to let our temperature raise up. It's already to about 8, maybe 8 pounds right now. So we're rocking along pretty quick. It's not going to take it long to reach that 10 pounds. If you're at higher elevations, you're looking for the 15 pounds. Okay, so my weight will start to dance when we reach that point. Now, when all this starts happening and the temperature is going up, the metal, especially the All-American canner, the metal is expanding and changing, so it sounds a little bit like the lab of a mad scientist in here. You'll hear pops and creaks and moans and the boiling of the water. Don't let that worry you or scare you. As long as you've got a correct working gauge and you've got an open vent pipe with the weight on it, you're perfectly safe. So just get familiar with those sounds and know that they're safe and you're where you need to be. All right, so we're almost at 10 pounds. So we should start getting our dance here in just a little bit with our weight, and then I'm going to go over some points about that with you to help you know what to look for. And I hear it kind of building, a little bubbling going on, then some pops and cracks of the canner. And I do have this on high. Now a gas stove, the thing about a gas stove, and I love my old-timey gas stove, is that I can minutely and immediately just adjust the flame and the temperature. So that's a great benefit. So if you have an electric stove, it may take a little longer for some of these changes to happen. So I'm showing just above 10 pounds on my pressure gauge. So we'll be dancing and rocking over here in just a bit. There we go. Okay, that's what we're looking for. Now I'm going to talk to you a little bit about this rocking and this dancing going on. You hear it now, it's continuous. And that's not what we want. We don't want a continuous rocking because that means the canner is working too hard to keep the pressure regulated. So what I'm going to do is start adjusting my flame down just a little bit until I get a rock, a dance, or a pause, a dance, and a pause. So let me go ahead and adjust my flame down so I can show you what we're talking about. I'm not sure how well you can see the pressure gauge in the camera, but I'm about 11 pounds, which that's normal. If your pressure gauge will normally show about a pound, half a pound to a pound higher than the actual pressure, and that's just a safety factor because you don't want to go below 10 pounds when you're canning. That's something else to talk about, but I'm still rocking too much, so I'm going to adjust my flame down a little bit more. Okay, so another thing is, if in the process of your canning, if it drops below 10 pounds, for any length of time at all, you want to bring it back up to 10 pounds. There we go, we got our pause. Okay, so we're going to pause quite a few seconds and then we should start rocking again. But if it drops below 10 pounds, then you're going to have to bring it back up to 10 pounds and start your timing process all over again, just like from the beginning. So you don't want to count any of the prior time to that. There we go, so now we got the dance going. So we had our little pause. Now we had our dance, now we're pausing again. So that is perfect. You want to pause, and then a dance, and a pause, and a dance. Now, so I'm going to go ahead and set my timer for 25 minutes. It's been a couple of minutes more than that, but I'm going to go ahead and set my timer for 25 minutes, and I'll be back with you in just a bit so that I can show you the next steps. Okay, it has been 25 minutes. My timer just went off, so what we're going to do now is I'm going to reach over here and I'm going to turn the flame off out from under my canner. I'm going to allow the pressure to drop naturally on its own. I'm not going to do anything to help it out. If you try to help the pressure to drop faster, several things can happen. One of them is you will siphon the liquid out of your jars because the pressure change would be too fast. Or worse yet, you can crack a jar or crack all your jars, and after all the hard work that we put into that, we sure don't want to crack a jar. So we're just going to allow this to drop naturally to 0. Now if you have an electric stove, it's going to take a little bit longer because it's going to take a little bit longer for the heat to completely dissipate out from under the canner. So once we reach 0 pressure on the canner, I'm going to allow it to rest about another 5 minutes, and I'll be back with you after that point to show you the next steps and how we are going to make sure that we have a great product coming out of our canner that we can be proud of. Okay, so now my pressure dropped to 0, and it's been about 5 or 6 minutes since it reached that point. So now what we're going to do is we're going to pull the weight off, and you will hear a little bit of a hissing sound. That's normal. And we take our toggles off just like we put them on. We want to do opposite sides of each other. Now I'm going to twist my canner lid and I'm going to set it up on its locks where there's a slight gap where the air can move in and out. Just like that. Okay, so I'll be back with you in about 5 minutes, and then we'll get those beautiful jars out of the canner. So it's been about 5 or 6 minutes. So now we're going to go ahead and take the lid off and set it off to the side, away from our face. Whenever you take your lid off, you want to be careful how you handle it. You want to be very careful to not bump your pressure gauge. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to take those jars out, and let's just see what we've got. Wow, look at that. You It's dripping a little bit. That's hot, so I'm gonna hold it over here. Isn't that beautiful? Now, as it cools off, the carrots will settle down into the liquid, so that's not a problem. So I'm going to go ahead and get the rest of these jars out, and I'll be back with you in just a second. You can see I've got a pan of cornbread here. We're actually having red beans and rice for supper, so while the carrots were going, we were multitasking right here, and I baked a pan of cornbread. One of the things that you want to do, especially if you have stone, tile, or Formica counters, is you want to be careful about setting your jars on those counters because it can be cooler and it can cause them to crack. So what I do is, even though this is a wood counter, I still lay a towel down just to kind of buffer that a little bit. And also, you don't want to put them in a draft, like in front of an air conditioner or something like that, because that temperature change can still cause them to crack. And also on these, now these are the disposable lids. Now I do have some videos where I'm doing harvest guard reusable lids, but we're just talking about the disposable flats. Okay, these rings can loosen up during the canning process. That's perfectly normal. You want to leave them alone and just let these jars cool down and make sure they're all sealed. I would wait at least 12 hours, 24 is better, before you pull the rings off. You don't want to store them with the rings on there. If you have a jar that doesn't seal, put it in the refrigerator and use it within a couple of days. But now these are, it looks like most of these are sealed. They're still hot, so I'm not worried about it. I'm going to give them a little bit of time to make sure that they all seal, and if by chance I have one that doesn't, I'll put it in the refrigerator. When you do see where the fruit or the vegetables are pulled to the top, that is more common with raw pack than with hot pack, because when you cook them slightly, I just heard a ping, so that's a good thing. When you cook them a little bit, that releases some of the air that's also trapped inside of the vegetable, and it will allow them to sink down in the jar sooner, or even come out of the canner with the fruit or the vegetable down in the bottom of the jar. But I'm not worried about this at all. Raw pack is a simple way to do it. If you're starting out, it's not a problem. It's a great way to can your food. We have home canned wonderful carrots. 4 pounds made 6 pints, so that'll kind of give you something to gauge if you go to the grocery store and you want to buy some carrots and get started on your own. So I hope that you got some value out of this video, and I hope that you gain some confidence that you can take that step and start pressure canning on your own. Something as simple as a few jars of carrots can be the first step to a long line of being able to put good healthy food on your pantry shelf for your family. And you know that I'm going to share some beautiful words with you. Don't ever forget that your Heavenly Father loves you. And I'll see you on the next video. God bless.